In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how you can go about debugging an iOS application built with Ionic whilst it's actually running on a real device as opposed to just testing it through the browser. So I have my iPhone hooked up to my computer now via USB cable, and I've just got this app called Reflector that's displaying what I'm seeing on my phone on the screen here as well, so that you can see what I'm doing there. So one of the good things about Ionic is that we can do a lot of the development in the browser. It's web-based, and so it's fine for us to test and debug a lot of our code just straight in the browser. We don't have to worry about deploying it to a device or testing it on there. But in the end, if you are developing an iOS application with Cordova, you will want to test it at some point on a device, and it's probably best to do that throughout the process as well. Theoretically, the code should run the same on the phone as it does through a browser, but there can be some differences, and you're also not going to be able to test things like Cordova plugins if you're running through the browser. So what I'm going to do first is I have this application here that I built in a tutorial last week, I think, where I created this kind of fake splash screen. So it's an animated splash screen. You can't usually do a splash screen that's animated because it just has to be a PNG file. So I created this little method where we have a fake splash screen that pops up to make it look like the splash screen is animated. So I'm just going to launch that now, and you'll see what that looks like as I run it. So that's the real splash screen there, that just blank white screen. And then our fake splash screen with this SVG animation runs. Now, so this isn't something that I can really test properly on or through just a normal browser on my computer because I'm relying on using that splash screen and using some Cordova plugins to interact with that. So it's something that I'll need to test on the device. And so in this case, everything is working fine, but if I were to run into some issues, maybe the splash screen never displayed or it was just crashing or something like that, it would be hard to figure out where to go from there because in the browser we can just inspect element, we can see the console logs, but it's not so obvious how to go about doing that on a real device. But it's actually quite easy. All you have to do is connect your phone via a USB cable to your computer. You'll need a Mac if you're using, if you're trying to debug an iOS application on an iPhone, you will need a Mac for this to work. There's also a similar method available for testing Android or debugging Android applications using the Chrome web browser, but I'll probably do that in a separate video maybe. But all we need to do is come into Safari, just open up Safari on your computer, go to the Develop menu, and this might not be there by default, so you might have to Google how to make that available. And then you'll be able to find your iPhone or whatever device you're using there, and then just click on this Ionic blank, or it'll have the title of whatever your page is. So click that, and that's going to open up this debug console, which looks pretty much exactly like the normal one that you get through the browser. So if I have both of these up now, I might just resize that a little bit. So if I go through here now, I can select various elements, and you can see as I sort of hover over an app, you can see that highlighting on the device. And remember that phone that's on the screen to the left there, that's my actual device, actual phone that's running the application right now. So I can even go in right now and just change stuff in here, and that's going to immediately take effect. So if I wanted to debug some stuff in the DOM here, I could easily just play around with some stuff, delete some things. That can be useful if there's some weird styling things going on and you want to just try out a few different things. We also have we did have our network tab until I closed it down. Let me get that back. So yeah, we have the network tab here. If I were to refresh the application now, you'd see a bunch of network requests going on there. And this is an important point. Sometimes errors will happen at startup. So this happens a lot where, say, maybe you get like just a blank white screen, but you open up this debugging console here and there's nothing there. There's no indication as to anything that's gone wrong. But what happens is, since we need to open this inspector after the app has already started, some console errors could have happened, but we didn't get to see them. So what you can do is click this little refresh button up here in the top left, and that's going to reload your application with this debugger open. And you can see as I refresh that there, we hit this debugging statement here. I've got a breakpoint set on this code. So we can also debug our applications using the debugger like we would in the browser as well. So to do that, all you have to do is just come into to the resources page here, and you'll see we have the index.html file there, and we have a scripts and a style sheets folder. So if you go into the scripts, you'll be able to see your main.js file, which is the bundled code for your application. But you can actually expand that, and you can see your source code as well. So if you come into the source folder, you can see the individual pages of your application. And say if I went into the splash screen folder there, click on that, and I can see the code that I've actually written. And then I can set up that breakpoint on the splash screen call there. I can set up a breakpoint anywhere I want. And then when that code runs, it's going to pause the application, and we can try and figure out what's going on. So I don't want to actually get into how to use the debugger and stuff like that in this video. I just want to mainly show you this. So if you are familiar with debugging through a normal browser, this is basically exactly the same thing. If you're not familiar with debugging with breakpoints and stuff like that, you probably won't really understand what's going on here, but essentially this is just a way to kind of stop the execution of your app at a certain point, and then we can sort of see what's happening at that point in time. We can also use breakpoints to, maybe you want to see if this section of the code ever even executes. So maybe in the application, our splash screen was, our fake splash screen here was never getting hidden. And I think, well, that's weird because, well, this call should be dismissing that splash screen. Why isn't that happening? Maybe I set a breakpoint there, refresh the application and see if that ever gets hit. And so in a second here, that triggers after 4 seconds, and you see that triggers, so that's fine. And obviously this is working. But again, I'll probably make a video, maybe going through a more in-depth example of using this. And you also have your timeline tab here. Let me just get rid of that breakpoint. So in the timeline tab, we can see all these network requests and stuff coming in, and you see a breakdown of the timing of how your application's loading. And then you can even sort of highlight specific sections in here. I could look at the JavaScript events going on in this within this time frame here. And I can see we have a micro task there with a promise that's being executed. So there's not a lot going on in this application to really do anything interesting here. But you can kind of sort of organize stuff by the amount of time they take to execute, and that can help you find perhaps some areas in your application where you could do with some improvements, especially if you see something in here that's taking up a huge chunk of time. Okay, so in this video, I just really wanted to show you quickly how to launch this debugger and how you can test and debug an application while it's running on a real device as opposed to through the browser. There's a lot you can do with the debugger, obviously, and there's a lot of stuff here I haven't covered, so we'll probably do maybe even a few videos and stuff like this in the future. If there is anything you'd like to see specifically, leave a comment, and yeah, I'll see if I can come up with some kind of tutorial for it. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one.